David, maybe you want to show your system. I've got many students interested on knowing how you manage to compose and how you route everything. Are you using vPro maybe?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably not, it's probably a fairly elaborate version of a pretty standard system at the end of the day. So I have two computers which are running vPro. So I've got a big vPro which has got 256 gigs of RAM, and then because I ran out of space on that one, I got another one, but the other one's 64 gigs. And so as you'll know with vPro, everything's sort of living on there. So these are the sounds that what I try and do. I try and not, I don't just buy a sample library and throw it on there. I try and put on there sounds that I know I'm going to want to go back to all the time. So orchestral stuff, percussive stuff, anything that's more sort of unique or synthetic, I'm probably going to load up inside Cubase because I'm going to want to change it. But this is bread and butter stuff that I want to go back to time and time again. So it's living in vPro on two machines, and then it's coming back into Cubase over here. So lots and lots of buses back in, still with quite a lot of separation on its return into Cubase. So for example, rather than just having a percussion bus, I've got the percussion coming in probably over 30 or 40 different inputs. So I can do different things. If I want to add a delay, I want to change the reverb, whatever, I can do all that with those individual buses there. And then on the way out, because I then go from Cubase into Pro Tools, I have 64, actually we just added a few more the other day. I think I have 70 outputs going into Pro Tools, which sort of condenses those down, although 70 is pretty wide. And then in Pro Tools, as well as having that big wide split, which I can deliver to a mixing engineer, I also have a smaller split of, let's say 12 stems, which I could, if I'm doing something, for example, my TV shows, that doesn't go to a mixing engineer, that straight from here out to the stage. So I need that all the sort of piping laid, and that I can send those 12 stems straight to the music editor, bang, done. So yeah, it's a, and you could do all of this, we were just talking, you could do all of this sort of inside the box. The reason that I like to have specifically the Pro Tools, which I know a lot of people are sort of saying, well, do you really need that? I mean, what it gives me is the opportunity, to put all, if I'm working on a movie, I can put all the reels in there, and I can keep, just because I've written a piece of music in Reel 3, I can't, and just say that's approved and done, I can't stop thinking about it. I've still got to think, how does that relate to the rest of the score? And that's what Pro Tools gives me. I can constantly, both visually and also just by clicking, orally hear the full piece coming together. And I would worry if I was doing everything sort of in individual sessions and not having that overview, that I'm isolated too much on this piece and this piece and this piece, and not on the score at large.
Maybe what a student would be wondering, they'll understand the vPro going from the slave computers to the main Cubase. All the audio from Cubase to Pro Tools, that's MADI, 70,
yeah, that's
I'm guessing?
MADI, yeah.
So you mentioned that you mix some of the stuff when for TV shows, for example, and that doesn't go to your engineer.
No, mostly not. A couple of shows, for example, I did a show called Mercy Street, which was it was like an acoustic little score, like 4 or 5 instruments, and that did go to the engineer, just because, to be honest, that's not a particularly big skill of mine, and we were recording in his booth, and so I wanted it to all run through his system. But normally, for most of my other shows that I've done, TV shows, excuse me, it's what happens in this room comes out and goes to the stage.
Usually I'll tell them that 80% of the sound happens while we are composing. And we can mix. We are not professional mixing engineers. And so they have to pay attention to produce a good arrangement, a good composition, a good orchestrated. When you are delivering to a show, you're doing a little bit of mixing.
Of course,
When does it happen? Does it happen in Pro Tools? Do you mix afterward in Cubase, Pro Tools?
I'll answer that question in 1 second, but I think you've raised a very good point. That the industry's changed very much from people who were doing this sort of starting 40 years ago, where you were hired as a composer. When you're hired as a composer now, you're actually being hired as a composer, a mixer, an orchestrator, an arranger, and you've got to deliver all those things in a way that some of those older guys didn't really have to worry about. Budgets were bigger. They had all those people who they could source that stuff out to. So yeah, when I'm writing a piece for The Good Wife, all those things have to come into play. With the mixing, I actually kind of mix as I go. Sometimes it will end up in Pro Tools, and I'll listen to it and I'll sort of think, oh, I need to adjust the levels a little bit, or this is a bit too dry, I'm going to add a little reverb here. But I tend to write, arrange, compose, and then play it back and make I'll do a lot of, as everyone does, riding with the CC volumes, making sure that it sounds as expressive as possible. And when I think I've got a good musical performance, I'll leave those alone, and then I'll put my sort of mixer's hat on, and then I'll go to faders, and I'll sort of think, okay, the performance is good, it sounds realistic, but I now need, in the same way an engineer might push the spot mics.
Exactly.
So I try and see them as slightly two distinct things. This is me being musical, and this is me being an engineer, and that's what I quite like about having those both things available.
These days with the sample libraries, that's changed a lot. With sample libraries that we can use, if the arrangement is good, it's almost there. We can do a little bit more of mixing afterwards, but it's there.
You often don't need to do too much. I mean, obviously, if you're doing a massive action cue, God, I wouldn't want to. I can't mix that. I mean, that's a skill which, I can make something sound loud, but I think as you say, with the libraries that are out there, you can get pretty great results. If you know what you're doing, if you know what notes to play, and you've got a sort of musicality that wants to come out. I think you often don't need to do a whole lot. Find a good reverb. Again, the reverb I use the Todd AO scoring thing from on Altiverb. I've got one or two others which I try from time to time, but it's there, it's in the template, it works. Occasionally I sort of watch the piece of music back with the picture. I think, oh, why something's odd. The room that I'm looking at is small, and the piece of music I'm writing is too swimmy, so I pull the reverb back. Yeah, I got into this quite recently. And again, I don't quite know whether I'm completely sold on it, but the idea being that rather than having violins, spiccato, a MIDI track for violin, spiccato, violin, sforzando, violin, sis, I basically got one MIDI thing, and then you can click, and
sort of thing.
Yeah, and the advantage of it is that you don't have so many tracks, and you're not sort of clicking around. Also, I think musically it makes you think, well, what is that violin player really doing? They're playing a long note here, then they're stopping, they're going to a short note, then a trill. So I think it makes you think more horizontally rather than just stacking up sounds on top of each other, which is a bit of a danger.
Yeah.
So that's certainly something I sort of set up, and I like it. I don't know if I love it, so I'm going to pursue that a little bit more. I think in terms of workflow, obviously organising the template so you know where things are and it makes sense. And to be honest, that's not something that I've done and then it's done. It's something I'm constantly evolving. I'm fortunate that I have a part-time assistant. He works for me 3 days a week, and one of his big jobs is to look at new sample libraries and evaluate if there's good stuff in there, and then see how it will work. Should we replace stuff that I've already got, swap things out? How does it look on here? Because really, I guess because I've been doing this a little bit, and I'm lucky that I'm able to have that. So I used to do all that stuff myself.
It's time consuming.
It's time consuming, and if you've got to write when someone's hiring me to write something, I can't say, yeah, give me a couple of weeks so I can work on my template, and they don't want to hear that. So I want to sort of declutter my mind as much as possible from all this stuff. But anyone can do that. When you're starting out, put some time into thinking about.
And then you will learn.
You'll learn, and then B, when you actually get to the point where you're saying, okay, now I'm going to write a piece of music, you're not mucking around with, well, where did I put this library? Where did I put that library? Should this have reverb? Should this? You don't want to. That's going to absolutely derail you when you're trying to be creative. So I think it is, organisation in this area is very, very useful. You could just say, I'm sure there are people who just pull up patches, randomly and it works for them. But I think, especially if you're dealing, with fairly large pieces of music, I think having, put some thought in beforehand. And it goes back to also your question about the synths. Sometimes when I'm not busy on a particular project or I have a bit of downtime, that's the time where you figure something out out that you don't really know. How does this piece of gear work? How does this software work? How does this sample library work? And I think you want to be doing that when you're not necessarily up against a deadline or someone saying, where's my piece of music?
Yeah. But definitely a system like this one, when you are under pressure, you know where your sounds are, and that helps.
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah. I mean, I know I have the confidence that I can go open this template. It takes about a minute to open, and I know everything is triggering. Everything's going to work. I mean, pretty much everything is sort of hooked in properly. Probably, I'll say that and play something. It probably won't work, but it is. So that. From my point of view, that isn't a worry. I can worry about the other things, and there's plenty of other things to worry about.
Well, a big template will always need a little bit of maintain, or having someone here around, taking care of it.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah. Especially now, you've got with sample libraries, I've got all these different mic positions and, key switches and stuff like that. I mean, it's one of those. It's one of the sort of pros and cons of the great new sample libraries that are out there. They're getting so realistic, but in order to get that realism, you need to keep an eye on sort of how it works underneath the bonnet.
Exactly. Well, Dave, last question. Any project that you're working on that you can reveal, or that you can, for the composer fans that you've got?
Well, I'm, as I think you mentioned earlier, I'm sort of halfway through The Good Fight at the moment, which is a spin-off from The Good Wife, and we just got 10 episodes of that, and literally just got to the halfway point, which is weird because it feels like I only started it the other day, but I guess that's just the way it goes. And then the next concrete thing I've got lined up, I've been fortunate to have been working with Danny Elfman little bits here and there over the last 3 or 4 years. He's asked me to come in on a few projects, and he's asked me to come in on the final instalment of 50 Shades of Grey. So I'm going to be working on that. So I finished this TV show in April, and then I'm going to be working with Danny for a couple of months on the final 50 Shades of Grey, which is, when I moved here, I started working for Harry. That was my in, and then I got my own things going. But it was my agent who said to me a couple of years ago, would you be interested in helping someone out? And I was thinking, I don't think so. I've done that. But I said, who is this someone? Let me just ask. And she's Danny Elfman. I thought, okay. Well, for him, for John Williams, I'd probably say yes. Let me think. And it's, and in fact, last year I had quite an unusual year where I was co-composing scores. I mean, what I'm doing with Danny isn't co-composing. I'm just helping him out. But last year I co-composed scores with John Ottman and with John Powell. And it was really nice, actually, to, obviously my goal, like any composer, any one of your students, they want to see their name up at the front. They want to be the sole creator. But what was interesting for me is just to work alongside someone else and see their perspective and their angle and their take on things. Because it's all, we're always learning. A bit like the template, it's never going to be there. You're always going to change it. And anything I've said to you today, I'd like to think a lot of it is like, there's a core of truth to it, but we could do this interview again in a year or 2 years, and I imagine my thoughts and opinions would have evolved a little bit. And I think, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, I think, I don't want to be writing additional music. I've done that, but you never know where my relationship with Danny will go. Not that I expect to be given a film from it, but just musically it will inspire something. It will unlock something that it wouldn't do.
You'll know new people.
Meet new people, new ways of approaching film. Again, it's that, what I was going right back at the beginning, it's that just the unexpected nature of this whole business. And the fact that if you say, I'm only going to do this, I'm only going to do that, I think you're going to find that doors don't open as much as saying, okay, let's try this out. And whether that's taking on a short film that really doesn't look very good, or helping out someone who says, can you write some music for me because I've run out of time, or doing that string arrangement that I mentioned my friend did, doing a jingle. There's no guarantees in this world, and I think especially in a competitive business, it really pays to be as sort of open-minded and as broad as possible.
Totally. Well, Dave, thanks so much for your time.
Not at all.
It's been a pleasure for us as well. So that's it.
I feel like I should play a chord before we go.
Exactly, a cadence or something.
There we go.
Thanks everyone for watching. That's nice.
Excellent.
Well, thanks so much.
Oh, no, pleasure.